All right. Welcome to our episode of Peak today, where we are going to be talking about human transformative experience with Loic Gray. He is our guest today. He is a teacher and a lot of other things, some of which I hope we will get into in quite a little bit of depth today. So as we get started, Loic, why don't I turn the mic over to you and ask you to just introduce yourself. Tell us what is important, in your opinion, for us to know, and give us some thoughts on what do you think human transformative experience is.
Thank you. So, as you said, my name is Loic. I currently live in Switzerland. I'm a primary school teacher. I have taught actually anything from French to English to German to science, to whatever. Currently, because of the pandemic, I am teaching French. And I have always been interested in philosophy and psychology, but I wasn't really attracted to the university world and the idea of lectures and everything like that. That wasn't really something that I was attracted to. But I have read quite a lot of things, and I was lucky enough to have a few hobbies that allowed me to put into practice what I learned regarding philosophy and psychology. Not everything, of course, but still, that was a very interesting playground for me. And as far as human transformative experiences is regarded, I would describe a transformative experience as an event that changes you so much that you can consider that the person before the event and after the event are not the same person anymore. So there is a very implicate and very deep change with the person after the event. Um, Something that has changed in his relation to the world and to himself or herself. And in such a way that you cannot you can almost describe them as two separate person now, and that's something that really interests me. How we can how we can be a host for basically multitude selves, and that's something that I try to put into practice, that I think a lot about, and I try through different performances to make people more aware of this kind of thing. So yeah, I think that sums it up.
So you've had a long-standing interest in philosophy and psychology outside of the university context.
Yes.
And we've talked about this before off camera, but you do a lot of work in mentalism, and
Yes,
so
exactly.
yeah, if I'm wondering if well, I'm guessing that that's where your mind was sort of going in terms of the kinds of experiences that you've had in transformation or in facilitating transformation in others.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I have been through a few transformative experiences myself, but none of them are related to my performance of mentalism. That's something that really mostly unaffected by this kind of thinking, as far as I know. Many people think about a lot of things of different topics. Of course, psychology and philosophy is something that is really widely
Mm-hmm.
discussed in this area, but the very specific topic of transformative experience is, as far as I know, not something that is explained, and that's certainly not a plot. That's not something that we talk about like in a way of presenting mentalism or mind reading demonstrations. I was lucky enough to have a few ideas, I think a year or so ago, where
Mm-hmm.
I was able to put these kind of ideas not only in a few performances, but like in a real demonstration, like to make basically a show out of this idea of transformative experiences.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that went?
Well, actually, maybe I start with my background. I started doing magic when I was 4 years old. So I started really young, and I have been training and performing ever since. When I was about 16 or 17, I discovered mentalism, and I really tried to practice. But I was really shy, and what I was able to access wasn't really interesting to me. I felt that the idea of mentalism could offer so much as a performer and for the audience as well, but I wasn't able to find the right frame, the right angle to act my presentation. And I just kept studying, and it is a very wide area, and of course it's quite secret, so you really have to buy the books, you have to talk with the people, you have to learn some of this stuff is really difficult to master. You have to think through a lot of details, but something was really lacking, and that's why I only performed like maybe 10 times a year, which is not that much, to be honest, but most of it was due to the fact that I wasn't finding any coherence between all those pieces I was putting together, and that was like a few demonstrations of very good performance pieces, but separated from myself. It wasn't like it was lacking a narrative, basically. And due to the pandemic, I had plans to go to London. Obviously, that was cancelled quite abruptly, to put it at its mildest. And then actually, I just had an idea, starting about the idea of a performance, of a trick, of a demonstration I was performing that was involving dreams and how we interact with dreams. And so I decided to say, well, maybe you can just put that as a main theme in a show, and not only do just one piece about dreams, but put everything about dreams. And then it started like, I started to have this idea, and I thought it was a really good idea. And then it started to have another idea about the character. Why would someone do this performance, this show about dreams altogether? And I started this idea that I had about the presentation asked itself back a question about the performer. And so I started to write a character, why is he interested in dreams? What can he do? And most importantly, what can he not do and why? And then I started to apply some performance and scripting techniques to try, basically like a theater piece, to try to put some drama. And then this drama puts a different angles on some of my performances, and then it's kept going back and forth until I had like this very clear, very, very obvious idea now that I think about it. And this whole process went for like almost 3 days and 3 nights, where I barely slept, just because I woke up, I was so excited because I could do this. And I would start writing and performing and researching, and it would go on and on and on. And then I would fall asleep almost exhausted and wake up 4 hours later and keep writing and keep having this idea. And the funny thing is that when you start having this insight, it's basically a flow state where you just find everything is so easy. It's just like you are exploring like a creative area, and whenever you just lean against a door, just open. Like sometimes you just have to go with an axe and smash your way through the door. And in this particular state, you just barely touch the door and it opens, and you can just take whatever you want, go back, and then you touch another door, another window, and just opens, and you can just go. And basically, it's like, it's free. Everything is free. everything is so easy and you just have to enjoy it as much as you can and take as much as you can. And the thing that's strange as well is that now I'm done with this performance. I have written the scripts. A few people have read it to give me some insight how I can change, some people's opinion about this performance. But I know that this state is over now. That I just have to start performing it. But the thing that I keep from this state is, I don't know why, but I feel so much pressure now on performing this. Not because I'm scared of public's reaction, but because this thing that I don't want to say I have created, because I don't have the feeling that I have created it. I just have the feeling that I have found it. I really want to do it justice. And so the pressure is not from the audience or for me. I am not scared. I'm not scared anymore to go on stage in front of people. That's something that I don't feel that much anymore. But that, like, this is something that's so precious to me now that I really want to make it justice, and I want it to be the best it can be, and so the best conditions and the best performance and the best character. And so now I have found a narrative that is so coherent, and the effects are so coherent regarding to the character. Everything goes so smoothly that I really think that I have found one piece of something and not multitude different pieces. It's really like a whole. And that was my journey lately.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that you've gone through, in some sense, different phases of transformation, um, in terms of starting with interests in magic and then delving into mentalism and now dream work in some sense. And that journey has led you to um, undergo a kind of transformation of how you see all these things fitting in together and the big picture sort of sense. So I'm sure that what anybody listening to this right now is wondering about is things like, well, what is magic? What is mentalism? What is the kind of dream work that you're up to right now like, and what is it about? So maybe you could just run us through what each of these things is and what your current projects are.
Of course. Well, magic can be defined, and I'm sure many people will disagree with me. But I talk about magic in the performance sense. So really, like if you ask a kid to draw a magician, he will probably, except if he is a Harry Potter's fan, but he will draw someone with a big hat and a white rabbit out of his hat, and that's the kind of magic I'm talking about. Basically, in its most basic terms, magic is performance art in which the magician or the performer gives the illusion that the rules of physics or logic are broken right now. The main logical rule that is broken is cause and effect. Important thing that is broken when you assist to a magic trick. You cannot put together the effect and the cause. Those two are not correlated. That's how it works. Then you have mentalism or mind reading, which is, and some people will disagree with me again, which is a related art. I don't think that mentalism is an evolution from magic. I do think they have, they definitely share properties, but they are not related. I think mentalism from the Victorian era in England, where they try to give the illusion that they were able to talk to the dead, that they were able to influence the future and things like that. So I do think that it's quite separated, even if obviously you can easily go to one area to another. And we use a lot of the magician's techniques to have our own ends, shall we say. And mentalism is basically the illusion that something mental and supernatural is going on, such things like influence, telepathy, precognition, stuff like that. And you can see why both those arts are considered as related. I have went through a few arguments myself with magicians, because I introduced myself as a mentalist, or I used to. And most of the times, magicians say, well, basically mentally just being a magician. And if actually you ever go to a convention, because we do have this kind of mentalists and magicians, if you really want to start a war, you just have to shout this very loud. Mentalism is just basically magic with a mental flavor. Okay, you don't want to stay in the room for too long, because that might be dangerous. But this is really, like, really a hot topic in this area. And even if I consider myself smart, every single time that I hear this sentence, I just have like a few bad thoughts coming into me. And yeah, I just try to keep calm and take a deep breath. And most of the time it goes okay. But I do think they are really different, and they are different for at least one aspect, and that is when you see a mentalist, if he's doing his job correctly, you are wondering how real is what you're just seeing. If I just, if I were going to just perform a card trips, you know that cards don't vanish. You know that I don't have any supernatural abilities. You know that somehow I must have hidden the card in my hand or in my pocket. You know that, even if you don't know how you know that's something you don't know. When you're performing mentalism, sometimes just people are assuming that you are the real deal, that you do have maybe not as much as you pretend to have, maybe not as supernatural as you claim it to be, but they think that maybe something is happening, maybe something that they don't know. The most current frame or angle of presentation for mentalism right now is like what we call the psychological illusionist. Like, I am just using body languages and facial expressions.
Can you give an example?
Of course, of course. The main representative of this kind of performance is a British mentalist called Darren Brown, and he has been like hugely famous for this kind of presentation. So, to give you an example, if I just ask you to think of a card, okay, we'll just take it out of a deck, so you're not thinking about the ace of spades or something like that. You just pick a card out of your deck, and without even touching, I'm just say, okay, well, now just think of the color of your card, and just have, okay, well, you have your black, you have your red, you have black, you have red. Okay, so now you are thinking of a black card, right? Okay, that's black because you just actually, when I said black, you were just nodding your head, so it indicates that it's a black card. No, black cards are separated into clubs and spades. Okay, so you have two areas. So think about your card: spades, clubs. Okay, you looks on this side, so it means that it's spades, etc., etc. And by biological process, because I am able to read the signals, the tells from your body and from your expressions, I am able to guess which card you are thinking of. And everybody basically is doing that. 98% of the performers that I have watched, be it live or on screen or wherever in the world, they are taking this frame. And I can understand why, and I have presented it that way myself, like I'm like every other one in this regard. But I think that it's really limited. It's really it's really like you don't go really far with that unless you are Darren Brown, obviously. But and it really lacks any drama, I think, and in the end, personality, I would say. Like there is absolutely nothing separating me from another guy who is just saying that he's only watching your eyes because that's everything he needs, and another guy will say, well, that's just about how you move your hands when you speak. Or that's it really is limiting, and this is bogus. I mean, this is a presentation. This does not exist. And there is a small war. I talked about the war between magicians and mentalists. There is even in the mentalist area, there are a few factions where some of them are arguing that when you claim or when you just let the audience assume that you have supernatural abilities, then you are being dishonest and basically that you deserve to be exposed. And those kind of performers are really polarizing the debate in that. And in my opinion, it is at least as dishonest to pretend that you are able to read body language when you are not. That's still a lie. And the only thing that makes it less dishonest, according to them, is the fact that people are more likely to buy it, which is no excuse to me. It makes it even worse. I mean, just like, no, not because the lie is more believable, doesn't make you less guilty of saying a lie. So we just have to admit that we are no scientists, we are entertainers, and we're not here to educate our audience. And I have tried to educate my audience about the dangers of thinking, of believing about ghosts, of believing about supernatural activities and stuff like that, and psychics. Said, I have no supernatural abilities. I'm just a guy performing and using tricks and psychology and stuff like that. All the time, I have had people after my show coming to me and said, this is really amazing. How old were you when you discovered that you had this gift? And it doesn't matter how much I try to say that, no, I am doing this, like, I'm fake. This doesn't exist. This is not doable. Every single time, like, you're just being modest. And it doesn't work. Actually, telling people the truth about this thing doesn't work at all. And so that's when I started to really put myself into starting asking myself a lot of questions about, okay, people are assuming this. What can I do to actually build upon this and do something greater, hopefully, and not harmful, hopefully, and something that would be able to be purely entertainment and good entertainment, something that I could enjoy performing, something that people could enjoy watching, even if they don't buy the whole idea of it. And that's probably that was the seed that started the whole process afterwards.
Okay, so let me just summarize what I've heard so far before we move on to the next step. So the main difference between magic and mentalism, from what I'm hearing, is that magic is about creating an illusion that the link between cause and effect isn't as rigid or even existent as we suppose it to be in our day-to-day experience. And such that when we see a magic trick, whether it's a rabbit being pulled out of a hat or a person disappearing, it amazes us by way of surprise. It breaks our basic presuppositions as to how physical reality is constituted, essentially. Whereas with mentalism, what's happening is a similar kind of break or shattering is happening, not with physical reality, but psychological reality. One of the laws of psychological reality is that you can't be inside my mind. You can't be seeing what's going on in there because it's so private and subjective to me. And yet, by paying attention to language and to different types of micro expressions in a person's body language or facial expressions or whatnot, you're able to, in a very real time and like quick fashion, infer what is going on in the person's private experience when they're being asked to think of a card, for example, or think of a number of some sort based on whether they lean in a little to this way or to that way, or if their voice goes up, or if they sink down, I'm guessing. So it's these kinds of cues that I'm guessing you pay attention to that hint at what's going on in the person's private experience. And based on this sort of feedback, you're able to lead it and guide it in the right direction in order to make the performance possible, right? The act as a whole possible, to bring it to its completion.
That's what you just described is it perfectly sums up what I just said. But I want to make sure that everybody understands that whenever someone pretends that he is using body language or every kind of meta language that you just described, is nothing but a lie. That is presentations. And that's how mentalism is right now presented to the world, because everybody is doing the same thing. But if you meet someone who is saying that he is using the tells or the emotions of your face to discover a number that you are just thinking of, this is a lie. We are using...
what's the truth? Yeah.
What's the truth? The truth is that we are using some of those techniques are real, like mnemonics. We use a lot of different ideas. We can use, I don't want to go into a full exposure of mentalism because I will have to change my name again. And that's not something I want, because other people want to, yeah. We don't want to do that. But we are using basically the same techniques as magicians to show the illusion that we are able to access your thoughts. But it could be something as easy as just asking you to think of a number between 1 and 10, and the most likely answer is going to be 7. And then it's, you know, that is going to have a very, very big success rate if you just perform that out of the blue. But another way to show that is if I go to someone and ask, okay, please think of a number between 1 and 10. You have something in mind? Yes, perfect, don't change. You're not thinking of the word 7, aren't you? And now you have two possibilities. Either people is going to confirm and say, yes, that's amazing, and you are just going to say, oh yeah, that's amazing. Or she's going to say no. And because the way you framed it, the way you asked the sentence by using a negative, it doesn't matter, because you said you weren't thinking about the number 7, weren't you? I said, no, it's right, it wasn't that. Most people think of the number 7, but not you. You went for something more unusual. And if you do that with enough confidence, you just have another try. And that's a lot of those different kind of techniques, and like literally thousands of different ways to perform it by using nothing but language. But we can use tricks as well. Like if you write something, I can just watch what you are writing, and because you assume that I wouldn't be so bold to do this. I am. Well, last time I was in London, a girl just went over me and she paid her glass with a credit card, and because I was just sitting next to her, I could see her ID card, and I just saw her birth date. Just happened. Just saw her birth date, and I just remembered it because I have, as I said, I have mnemonics. and I just watched her where she was sitting with her friends, and then I was just like with my drink, and I just passed by and said, "Oh, do you want to see something strange?" And because I knew her, yeah, I mean, you just have to take a chance. And the more you watch people, and the more you know people, and the more you perform, and you just take guesses sometimes, and it works. It works just fine. And things are a bit more difficult when you're just performing, because you can't rely on such blessings coming to you. You just have to take the opportunities and use scripting and tricks and everything in between. But I really want to stress that whenever someone is performing as a body language expert, it doesn't work. And I understand why everybody is using it, because it fools many people. It seems real. It doesn't have the ethical implications of someone who is claiming to speak to the dead. But I think that it has been overused, and that people need to be more creative and start doing their own thing, in my opinion. That's why I am bashing this idea right now.
So before I ask one question, I have another one, just a terminological one. You keep saying, I think mnemonics. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Could you
mnemonics.
explain? Yeah, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, of course. Mnemonics is psychotechnology that allows you to just remember things more easily by associating it with something that is relevant to your mind currently. So one of the very, I can give you an example how to learn a list of 10 objects, for instance, and knowing it in such a way that you are able to just say the 10 words in order, but you can go backwards as well if you want. And if I ask the number 4 or the number 8, you can remember it like in an instant. One, for me, the idea of one is the Eiffel Tower, which is like standing as a one, like in a shape of a one. Two is I don't remember the name in English. The cygne, swan. It's a swan. Like you have the shape of a swan. Three is like someone sitting on a chair. You can see like the bosoms in the shape of a three. 4 is a boat, when you can see the shape of the 4. 5 is like a monster, with a cap and a big mouth. 6 is like, it's a bit French because I speak French, and 6 is C, someone which is axing something, a saw. 6, so it works as well. 7 is where you hang people, just like a very dark things. 8 is a belt, because you are just squeezing something in the middle of an 8. 9 is for me an œuf, because 9 in French is neuf, so it's an egg. And 10 is something that the artists use for their brush. Like 10, you can have the brush and the palette with the colors. And so if you are giving me 10 objects, like 1 is flag, I could see like the flag or our flag being perfect.
Loic, sorry to interrupt. I think your volume just disappeared for a moment. I think you're back now, though.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
Touch.
Yep.
Okay. And 2 is just like for aspirin, and you just imagine, picture in your mind the swan eating an aspirin and just bubbling and stuff like that. And if you are methodic, you only need, with some practice, you only need to have it said to you once, and you can remember it for as long as you want, basically. And we have a few other techniques to remember numbers, to remember facts, to remember dates, to remember drawings, to remember different algorithms or steps that allows us to remember a lot of different things, which were particularly useful when I was in high school.
Okay.
So that's part of the thing that is kind of real.
Okay, I see. So it sounds like it's a very complex process, actually. The body language reading, body reading account, I guess that's one way of calling it, is a bit too naive and simplified because um, maybe so I'm not a mentalist, but I'm in psychology. So one of the things that we do pay attention to in psychology is how people act and how they show up in the world. And especially as clinical psychologists, we try to find ways of intervening and inciting transformative experiences in people's ways of being, right? And a lot of this depends on um, not just what we're seeing in them, but what it is that we're bringing into the process to allow for the facilitation of a certain kind of experience to take place. So we're what so I'm not a mentalist. I don't actually practice this stuff. I've never really tried it or had any experience or even much exposure to it myself personally, but based on just what you're saying, it makes most sense to me that um there is a kind of feedback loop that's established between the mentalist, in this case you, and the person that you're doing the mind reading on. um it's an action reaction sort of loop where you keep sort of doing things that lead the conversation in a certain direction, and you give people a choice at every step of the way. So it's kind of like a flow chart that unfolds, but that's kind of guided or supervised by you based on whatever script or scheme you're coming into it with. And based on what you see the other person do, the kind of choice they make, based on the options that you've given them, you then take it to the next step and keep guiding it and leading it forward. So I guess maybe I'm nitpicking here. I'm not sure, but it doesn't sound like it's the case that you don't pay attention to body language at all. It's just that body language isn't the thing that you exclusively pay attention to when you're performing. It's one of the pillars, if anything.
It's to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's not
It's
a
not
pillar at all. It's not.
at
And I
all.
have read I've read a lot of book, especially by Paul Ekman, to just support
Mhm.
my claims that I was doing this for real. I'm not. I'm not. And I could actually challenge every mentalist basically that
Mm.
claim to do that for real, and they would almost certainly fail because that's not what we are doing, or in any way that's not the whole it might be useful as a support system, but never as the main thing. Like never. No, it doesn't happen.
What's the
Even
main thing you would say?
oh, I'm not able to say that because not because I'm keeping
Oh,
secrets, but because there is no one thing, and that's what people are. That's a fantasy that we know as a magicians, that you want to explain everything that I am going to perform by one element. You want one answer. How do you do that? And you don't expect me to go on a full 4 hours lecture explaining the 76 different
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
ways I had to get access to this information. The thing is, most of the time it is very complicated, and sometimes I am going to use this method to gain access to this information. And actually, if you want to perform things in a very convincing way, you are going to do an effect or a similar effect. Let's say like we have like three participants and we were on stage or in a performance anyway, and I'm asking each one of you to think of a word. Okay, and basically I'm just giving you a book and say, okay, well, open the book and please just don't show me, and think of any book that you read. Don't say it out loud. And then Gil, please just go back to your memories and think of a childhood memory that you have. Can you sum it up in one single word? Yes, thank you, keep it. And then Suraj, please think of any word basically that you can think of in the French or English vocabulary. And then I am going to just I can guess every single one of your thoughts and every single one of your words. Basically, it's one effect, the same effect. You think of a word, I'm guessing it. But if I'm doing that properly, I am going to use 3 different methods. And because every method has its own weakness, I am going to use the 3 different methods to conceal each other weaknesses. And because you are assuming, that's a bias, that I am using only one technique or one thing to guess every single one of your 3 words, this is completely impossible for you to solve, because you are just, there is no such thing as a perfect method, but you can't think of the flaws of each method because you are grasping this thing as a whole and not able to just make things separate.
Are we right now going through an example, or are you going to do a trick on us right now,
I
or?
have a word. I have a word if you want to try guessing.
Yeah, you want, I want putting me on the spot. No, I'm not. I can't do that on a. Well, actually, I can do that, but it could be a long process. It's strenuous process, but yeah.
Maybe we could put out an exclusive video at some other point then.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
if you
Like a
have,
bonus release. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Okay, so where we were at, so this part of the conversation started when I summarized the difference between magic and mentalism, but then we didn't get to the 2 other parts after that. The part of nesting your mentalist performances in broader narratives that somehow engage people on another, maybe even deeper level. So what that really means, what it's about. And then I think the final piece of the puzzle, where all the pieces of the puzzle kind of come together, through your work on dreams. I think based on what I was hearing, that's what it was. So maybe we can move on to those 2 bits now.
Yeah,
That's okay.
of course. So the first thing is how I put this idea into a narrative. Well, I have read a lot of books myself, and I know more or less implicitly how to build a narrative, because that's the way you build a narrative from um, from for a single trick is basically the same as a whole performance. Like you have like a three acts structure. That's how it works, and you can expand that to something broader. Um, so there is a rule that you have to start with a very strong effect, and basically end with your best effects, and put everything in between. Like, okay, so really, I'm grasping your attention, then I'm just doing my stuff, and then I end with a bang. I hit the climax. This is a smart way to dress your narrative, or to just sequence your performance.
Could you could you give an example of an act that isn't placed in a narrative and what it would entail, and then compare it to an example of an act that does follow a narrative and what that looks like, just so that we have a clearer sense?
Sure. I think the best way to illustrate that is by the anti-climax. What would you think about an anti-climax? An anti-climax is when something less powerful than the previous effect takes place without any reason. So, for instance, I am just let me think of it. That's difficult for me because I am trained to think in the completely opposite way. But if I just give you a deck of cards, red deck of cards, and I'm asking you to shuffle it, okay, and that you give it to me, you can examine it, you can shuffle it, anything, and just in front of your hearts, I just hold it together, and bam, and it changes into a blue deck of cards. Okay, that's a very strong effect, just so basically a red deck turning into a blue deck. And then I spread it out and I show that all the cards are separated black and red. This is an anti-climax, because the effect of the deck transforming into a blue one is more impressive than just being separated and black. If you want to turn it the other way, it's more powerful. You give me a deck, you can shuffle it, and then I took it face up, and by magic pass, I just show that all the cards are separated into black and red. And then, as a kicker ending, I just turn the deck over, and the deck is blue. This is a way we have to just we have to be very careful about how we write our performance to avoid such issues, and we have to apply this to the whole sequence of the show. Because if I start with my best thing ever and I just end with something like I'm solving a Rubik's Cube, for instance, it's not going to be that powerful, and people are going to remember more the ending than the beginning. As a matter of fact, that's how it works. And so I am going to end on a lesser note than how it started, which is almost like the failure for the recipe for failure and disappointment for your audience. So that's how you want to dress with the main idea. You have to end the kicker, you have to save the best climactic effect for the end and everything in between, which is something that might sound like easy, but it's not, because I know how I do things, and you don't, obviously, but it biases me about what is impressive and what is not impressive. And sometimes I am sure that something is really like transparent and blunt, and it's never going to fool anyone, and that I refuse to actually perform for years. And sometimes I remember I was asked, "Oh, can you just show something?" And I was out of, I had nothing, and I just decided to perform this effect that I never performed, and it got the best reactions, because we as magicians and we as mentalists are really poor judge to decide what is good, what is impressive, and what is not. So that's why I always try to show things first to someone who doesn't know how I do things, to have their own inputs and say, well, this is really good, you should keep that for the end or for later, or you have to, etc., etc. And that's really helpful. I would probably not be able to do that without those people, because being a mentalist makes you dumb to certain things, and the quality of an effect is one of them. And then if you want to really have the narrative, the scripting narrative, in my opinion, if you want to end very, very on a very high note, you have to be coherent from every single one of your acts. If my ability is like bending metal, like this is a supernatural, Uri Geller made a fortune and went hugely famous on this very, 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 very simple idea. That's everything that he can do. But then he just decided in the middle of his performance to just sew a woman in half. And then she survives and she's completely fine out of the box. There is something that's not working, because what he claims to be able to do is not relevant to what we just saw. So we have to be very, very, very careful. And that's when the character, what we call in writing, the character arcs and the character narratives is about. We have to think about, what can you do? Why do you do it? What can you not do? And what do you want that you cannot have because of what you cannot do? This is a bit of my idea, and that was the idea that I got when I was writing my show. Because basically, if you want to see a mentalism show, and there are many brilliant guys out there, I mean, just like fantastic guys, but when you see someone who is just average or even playing bad, even if they are coherent, even if they are good, even if they are skilled, drama is always lacking. You just saw someone and he claimed to do what he does, and he's succeeding at something. You are thinking of a word, I just pick it up. Okay, that's okay. Why would I do that? Okay, for the first question, why would I do that? And then if you really want to add a drama, it's the performance cannot be only about you. Or if it is about you, it has to be something interesting. And something interesting in drama is someone wants to have something and he cannot have it. And then you build upon something. But otherwise, it's really like just, I claim to be able to do that. And guess what? He did it. Oh, and he claims to do that as well, to be able to do that, to do that as well, and he does it as well, etc., etc., etc. And even if it ends on a very climatic thing, I think that the audience cannot relate to the performance because the guy is just like someone who is never encountering any kind of difficulties or any kind of troubles at all. And even if people, I think, are admiring you for your strength, people relate and bond to you because of your weaknesses, and that's why you have to show flaws and drama and weaknesses and failures from time to time to build empathy. And when you are finally arriving at the climax, when you have obviously your biggest challenge to come, they are with you on board. And so in such a way that when you succeed, they are with you and they succeed in a way with you as well. And that's really important. And that's something that is, in my very, very humble opinion, that's seriously lacking in today's performance.
I really like the way you contrasted between narrativized versus non-narrativized acts, and the difference, as I'm seeing it, at least based on what I heard, between an act that's nested in a narrative and one that's not, is that the one that's nested in a narrative achieves like a higher level of complexity than the one that isn't. It's kind of like the difference between insights at a micro level versus at a macro level. The kind of insight that you have when you're solving the 9-dot problem, for example, in cognitive psychology. You know one, or like there's the one that's the ball and a bat problem. You must have heard of this, I'm sure. It goes something like this: that a ball and a bat together cost $1.10, I think, or $1.05. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much do each of them cost? And you're likely to say that one of them costs um, 10 cents, so that the other one will be $1, and together they'll be $1.10. But the math doesn't actually add up, and there's an insight that you actually have to go through to get it right. I didn't quite explain it right, but we'll just assume that didn't happen. Ooh, magic. Okay, so versus the difference of like struggling with a certain crisis in your life for 5 years, and then through like 2 years of therapy, you arrive at this main insight and realize that you've just been going about something very important in the completely opposite and wrong way. So it's an insight that takes place at a different level. So the insight that takes place at the high level of organization kind of reorganizes all the microstates in a very important way, and everything comes together in a very clear and coherent sort of fashion. It fits. And what I'm hearing is that when you're performing and you're trying to give a clear, a coherent sort of narrative to what it is that's happening, you're essentially inviting the audience members on a journey with you, on a journey of different micro levels of insight, essentially, of different micro moments of surprise, right? And it follows a sort of arc that grips them, and at the very end it's kind of like they heard an entire song. It wasn't just a note or a chord, but it was an entire melody. So it's a very high level sort of gestalt. It's just like a song, actually. That's the metaphor that's coming to my mind. And based on everything that I've learned in psychology, our brains are wired for narrative. They're wired for things like music, because we don't just pay attention to different objects in the world at the level of detail, we try to look for and find patterns. And our brains are, they've evolved for finding patterns that span across time and space. Music is a great example of what that kind of patterning that we look for is like. Another example is actually stories. That's kind of what stories are. They're um, essentially heuristic, like summaries of different plots, that different ways in which things can unfold. And everything could be turned into can be turned into a kind of narrative in a sense. If you take a look at it from a bird's eye view, everything follows a certain plot. So it's a very easy and useful way of making sense of people's actions, of our position with respect to other people, of why it is that people are doing what they're doing, because everything pretty much is goal oriented. And it sounds like with mentalism, at least the kind of work that you're doing, you're really tapping into that basic machinery in the human psyche. What has evolved to take notice of and pay attention to um, higher order patterns in this sort of way. And when you do that successfully, people just fall into it. They experience flow states, and they get immersed in the experience. They get on board on this journey that you're taking them on, and at the end they feel like they've been touched or moved a certain way or even transformed.
Yeah.
um,
You said two things that I think are important. One is regarding more the mechanics or the behind the scene of how a trick, be it mentalism or magic trick, works. And basically, that's you said the word heuristics, and we as magicians know implicitly how heuristics work in a very broad way. I mean, if you go to any kind of magician and you say, "Oh, what are the heuristics that you are using?" He's probably not going to know what you're talking about. But we know and we are trained implicitly to recognize such heuristics, because if you just come at in this room and I have a deck of cards, um, a white, a red backed deck of cards on a box of cards, you are implicitly going to think that because the first card is red, you are assuming that all the cards are red. Because the deck is standing on the box, you are assuming that the box is empty. You are going to assume that the deck is small enough to fit inside the box, etc., etc. You are going to assume, because of the heuristics that you are using, so many different things, that are so many things that we can exploit in the end. That's how basically on a psychological level it works. Then we have obviously other things such as misdirection, for instance. That's very, very widely known. Well, nobody knows actually what it is, but it's a very, very useful thing. We have also psychological misdirection. We have many, many psychological tools that is just how we are going to be able to do the thing that we have to do in order to do the magic trick, invisible, psychologically invisible to you. And we are just trained to do that. And I think that's why we are so bad, because we understand them. That's why we are so bad at judging how impressive an effect is, because we are completely biased. We are exposed to this kind of things. And back in my early days when I was performing card tricks, especially, that's why I'm always talking about cards. I was able to recognize the good magicians and the bad magicians, or the good teachers and bad teachers of magic, when the bad teachers was always going to say, "Oh, and you can add, because you have this, you can add this, because you are hiding another card in your pocket, you can just end by producing it in a very, very fashionable way." And the very good teacher would say, "Well, you have too many effects in this one performance, cut it down." And that's how we know that you are doing something right. Because if you are able to cut something down and still reach the same amount of effect, the emotional effect of reaction from your audience, then you are doing something really, really, really right, and you should definitely do it. That's the behind the scene. You just mentioned the 9 dots problem, and that's exactly, I think it's exactly the same thing. You are not able to think outside of the box, and you are not able to think outside of the box because your brain is wired in such a way that it's not easy for you to do that. And we, as a magician, we try to very implicitly tell you, do not go outside of the box, okay, by convincing you, by showing, because if I speak to you like this, I'm implicitly showing you that my hand is empty. You know, I'm not saying, oh, my hand is empty. Have you noticed my hand is empty? I'm just saying, well, you know, when we speak, you just have to keep a very, very clear hand. And when I'm sure that you have recorded the information, I just hold something or keep something in my hand. And that's how it works. And you are not going to be able to think of, oh yeah, he hid something in his hand, because you are starting from this point of view that you saw my hands empty. That's the behind the scene, where we just reinforce, do not go outside of the box, relating to the 9 dots problem. Mm-hmm. And then you have, as you said, the narrative of the performance. And as far as I'm concerned, everything that you said is accurate and precise. And I would just go a bit further, especially regarding to my performance. My objective when I'm performing this piece is not for people to just be with me on board with the resolution of the problem. I want to give them tools that they can apply in their life after the performance. That's something that's really important for me. And you can just, the idea, the main idea, I end on this idea of dream interpretation on my performance, where I guess people's dreams, and I guess them, and then I interpret them for them. I interpret it for them. And this idea, I want them to think more carefully about their dreams and how they put meaning into events. And that's why when I wrote my performance, when I wrote my script, from the very beginning, I wanted to make them realize that they are not giving meaning to anything that happens to them. They are just living without thinking in a way. And I just wanted to say, well, maybe you can just stop and think. And maybe if you think about what this experience is trying to teach you, maybe you can actually get better out of after that. It actually might be some help. And that's the very, I admit quite bluntly that my objective is for them to just leave my show, obviously entertained and satisfied and happy, but thinking about, okay, well, maybe I will just start, to write about my dreams, and maybe I will just start to try to explain my dreams, and maybe, well, if it works with dreams, maybe I can just try to do that with other events in my life. And that's the idea that I have. And that's something that's really, really ambitious, I know, and it's probably not going to be relevant for, I don't know, 95% of my performance, who are just going to enjoy themselves and have a good time. But for maybe the 5% of people who are going to think about that, I do think that is going to be beneficial to them. And I really wanted to give the experience of impossibility, this experience of meaning and impossibility outside of just my performance. That was my main ambition when I wrote this part for me.
Have you had a chance yet to do this kind of performance with DreamWork?
No, I haven't so far. I was able to perform a few effects on isolated praise, and the reaction so far had been quite interesting, because the thing is, this performance is so important that I do not introduce myself as a mind reader or as a mentalist anymore. I just used a word that I'm not going to share because I really want to keep it for myself. But a word that sums up the whole character. And people say, "Oh, what is it?" And so, well, basically, I interpret dreams, and do you want to see it? And I perform something, and the reactions so far has been really, really, really good. Not only because the effect is strong and they are completely shocked, really, like a very, very strong magic trick, but because I keep having those messages saying, "Oh, I've had this dream. Do you know what it means?" And I can see that people, it stays with people. They are really aching for giving some meaning to something that they just thought were random before that. And so that's why I think this performance is important, or at least as well, it's important for.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm implicitly already comparing what I'm hearing you say about how you may have impacted. I mean, in some sense, the kind of impact that you leave on your audience members is could be compared to the kind of impact a psychologist might leave on their patients when they share something that maybe opens up new interpretive possibilities for the person to see something that they've been looking at for a while, but in a new way that they haven't seen before. And that just makes the world look like a different place and makes new things possible. So I guess I'm curious. Do Are you able to walk us through maybe a tiny example of um, some kind of interpretation that happened, or how somebody was impacted by it?
Mhm. Yeah, of course. I have a performance where one of the effects is just I ask someone to think about the main elements. They no, it goes the other way. To think about a question that they have in mind, and that is just not something really terrible. I am always very careful not to answer any kind of question related to health or stuff like that. I'm really very clear about that, and just to have like this idea about that, um, and once they already have this thought in mind, I just say, okay, well, just write it down on a card, and then just think about the first dream that pop into your mind. Okay, and sum it up with a few words. Like if I'm thinking about me flying on a mountain, I would say fly mountain. That's it. And then just fold the card. I don't want to touch it. And then you just tear it to pieces. I don't want to see it. That's not very important. And then I try to start describing, like I am the one having the dream, and I start to describe what she is dreaming about. And then I said, okay, well, you have this question, but I could feel that in your dream you had something else in mind. And now I start to describe the problem that she's facing in a day-to-day, in a daily life. And she doesn't say anything. I can be actually, I can be my back turned to her. It doesn't matter. And I remember that girl, she was having a very strong relationship with her father, and they hadn't spoke for a while, actually, like probably 2 years or 3 years or something like that. And she dreamt about a burning forest, and she was just walking in the forest, and everything was burning. And she wasn't scared, actually. She knew that eventually she would be fine. And then I made the connection of interpreting the dream regarding to the questions. And well, in this case, well, the tree is important because it shows your growing in your experience and the roots that you have and the connection. The forest is multiple selves, and they are sharing a space together. And the burning situation is quite explicit because well, the situation is not optimal as far as you are concerned. And it shows that, and I started to this story about the fact that forests are able to sustain small fires, and that we shouldn't try to prevent small fires, because eventually we will just arrive at a situation where there will be a massive fire that nothing can stop, basically. And I told her this story, and I didn't have to be very explicit, and I should not have been explicit, so I was quite happy not to be, because she was able to relay the dots herself. And she was really, really emotional about that. And so much so that I asked if everything was okay, if she wanted to talk about it a bit more, to debrief the situation. And she said she thanked me, and actually I've had a text message a month ago that she had her first small arguments with her father again, but it was a small argument, and she was able to make the connection with the small fire that's not burning the whole forest. And I think that's, and I was delighted. Obviously, I was like super happy to be able to bring such conclusion. But yeah, that's the main example that comes up to mind.
That's very cool. That's very cool, actually. I like a phrase you used a few moments ago about bringing in the impossible into a person's experience through your performances. And impossibility is a very interesting phenomenon, because it's clearly a legitimate experience that people have when they're surprised by what they see. Um, when what they see doesn't make sense based on their previous point of view, it completely shatters their expectations or their understanding of what's real, whether physically, as in the case of magic, or psychologically, as in the case of mentalism, or even dream work, kind of like what you're up to right now. But impossibility is, in some sense, based on everything that I've been hearing from our conversation today, impossibility plays a very central role in transformation, because it's when we experience the impossible that we're confronted with the very blind spots in our own perspective taking, and in our own reasoning, in our own understanding of what's real. And in some sense, it's these moments of impossibility that make way for important insights that transform people's way of being in the world at large. And I can give you a little example for this as well. So I've got a little brother, and he's a. I'm not tooting, I'm not taking credit for this or anything, but he's a pretty smart kid. He's 12. He's in grade 7 now, and the problem is that the very thing that sort of makes him like adaptive in some sense, his intelligence, is also the thing that sort of holds him back sometimes, because things tend to come easy to him. So that when they don't come easy to him, he tends to get a little easily frustrated at that, right? So one way in which that's shown up is with respect to exercise. Now, he's been exercising pretty regularly for just over a month now, and he had like a pretty good routine of like doing sit-ups and bicep curls with like little weights and stuff like that. It's very endearing. And then one day when I joined him for the workout, what I did was I sort of like dared him. I kind of enticed him through a dare to uh, do as many sit-ups as he can, to go till failure, because at that point he'd started to plateau. He wasn't feeling very sore after the exercises, and he was getting bored. So something had to be done. So I challenged him. I told him, let's just try to take it to failure and let's see how far you get, right? So he's doing it. He gets to 50. He gets to 60. He gets to 70 sit-ups, and he had been doing, I think, sets of 80 or no, sets of 60 reps, and he thought 80 was his limit. We get to 80, and then I'm like, Ed, his name is Edgar. Ed, are you at your limit yet? he just hit 80, and that's what he said his limit was. And he was like, no, I think I can still keep going. So it's like, all right, keep going. He keeps going. 90, 100, 110. And then I check in with him again. Are you at your limit yet? Do you think you're at your limit yet? Or can you keep going? And he said, I think I can still keep going. We keep going. We get to 140. And I say, do you think you can get to 150? And he said, okay, let's keep going. So we get to 150. And then he's surprised at this point because he can still keep going. This is already almost twice as much as he thought he could do. And now he's surprised, right? He's experiencing a moment of impossibility in this moment, right? And then he says, you know what? I'll just keep going to 200. So the kid just makes it to 200 sit-ups and realizes that even that wasn't his limit. So there was something about his sense of limitation that was self-imposed and even self-deceptive to a degree that good facilitators, and I guess this is a moment where I take some of the credit, but good facilitators, whether they're mentalists or psychologists or big brothers or friends or anything, they're able to invite people into these moments of impossibility so that the person could have a moment of realization and lift these self-imposed limits and transcend their own self or their own being, so that when they thought 80 sit-ups was the max they could do, they go to 200 and know that they could still keep going, that they still have more in themselves than they do. And it sounds like through your dream interpretation, you sort of made that kind of a moment of self-transcendence possible through a kind of, I don't know, maybe through a kind of impossibility. Um, Maybe that's one way of thinking about it. But those are my general thoughts
Yeah.
on what's been talked
I
about
think
so
you.
far.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And actually, there is a word, a coined word, which is the feeling of impossibility, which is or sentiment of impossibility, which is used in magic theory to describe this state where you are considering on a very brief period of time that something is impossible. Like you are just shocked and say, "Well, what just happened?" And for very brief moments, in the case of magic, for a very brief moment, you feel like something is wrong, and it opens up a world of possibilities. But because people know that magic isn't real, I think this window of opportunity really collapses very, very early. And that's the reason I think mentalism is more potent in this regard, because people think that that's impossible, but maybe actually we don't know everything about the brain, or we only use 90% of whatever. I don't know this kind of I know that's strong, but
Well,
I mean, think about that.
if you don't believe in magic, how are you ever going to find it? If
Yeah,
you think that all that's possible is only what you think is already possible, then how are you going to move beyond it?
yeah,
And so maybe the lesson here is to not just keep your mind open to the impossible, to but even to intentionally seek it out when you can, because that's where growth takes place. That's what when self-transcendence gets an opportunity to happen.
yeah. There is
So
this sentence. I can't remember the name of the book, but where actually the angel of death is speaking, and they say to the human race, "You have to dream about impossible things, otherwise, how could they ever become?" And that's a sentence that I really love.
so I think this might be a great place to wrap up, actually. Thanks for coming on today and sharing all of your experiences and insights in the work of magic, mentalism, and dream work. And gosh, I'm going to sit with this for a while, I think. But as we wrap up, we're now in the habit of asking our interviewees, our guests, one final question before we wrap up. If you could travel back in time and speak to an earlier version of yourself and share something important that you feel like could have been very helpful or meaningful, what would it be?
That's a that's a question that I have asked myself a lot, and I have never been able to came up with a very proper or smart answer. Um, I think I would go to my younger self and said, whenever you find yourself in very, very, very troubling or dire situations, try to keep asking yourself, what is this situation trying to teach me? I think that would be a very, very helpful help. Like this idea, the idea that I try to convey in my own performance, like try to give meaning to the things that are happening to you, because that's how you are going to ever be able to grow out of it and to benefit from them. That's I think that's the main idea that I would give my younger self.
Perfect. Thanks so much for sharing all that, Loic.
My pleasure.
And thank you to all our listeners for joining us on Peak and going on another journey on human transformative experience. Stay tuned for the next time. All right, take care.
Bye bye.